Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Thursday, February 25th, 2021 special meeting of the Communications and Technology Commission. We welcome you all and hope there are lots of you out there watching and wanting to make comments and talk about what we have to discuss today. Okay, it looks like all commissioners are here. So then I'm calling us to order. The Pledge of Allegiance. Who would like to lead that?
I'll be happy to.
Okay, let's everyone stand, hand over your heart.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, and indivisible with liberty for all.
And justice for all. Thank you, Richard. Okay, thank you. Okay, has everyone looked at the agenda? Has everyone looked at the agenda?
Move to
Yes.
accept the agenda.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve?
That's what I was just doing, approving a motion to approve the agenda.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The agenda is approved, 5-0. And now, has everyone looked at the minutes from our last meeting in January?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there any comments, additions, or wrong information?
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The minutes of our January 29th meeting are approved, 5-0. Okay, announcements and introductions. Does anyone have any announcements that they want to make?
Quiet.
You guys are giving me the silent treatment. Anything, Richard?
No, I'll save it for future agenda. Thank you.
Okay,
Oh, I have one thing to say.
okay, go ahead, Michael.
Congratulate Rachel on her award that she got last night for 10 years of service.
Nice, congratulations, Rachel.
Congratulations.
Wow, that's a long time. It's so flown by. It seems like you've been here forever, but I didn't realize it was that long.
And Michael Klein was 15 years last night.
Oh, that's right.
What?
Thank you. I
Congratulations,
apologize,
Michael.
Michael. That's true, indeed.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm wondering how these guys put up with us for so long.
Yeah, we do well together. Okay, now we're on to oral communications and public comment. Do we have anyone, Rachel, that wants to comment?
Attendees present in the meeting, if anyone wants to speak on an item not on the agenda, they can raise their hand. Let's see. I have one hand from Dr. Jonathan Kramer, who would like to speak during public comment.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Jonathan Kramer. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Chair Candace Weber. I appreciate it. This is an unagendized item, so it's informational only because it's simply just come up since your last meeting, which is there is a new wireless related bill that is now floating through the legislature, Senate Bill 378. It doesn't have to do with radio per se, but it has to do with the installation of fiber optic cables in roadways and right of way. And basically what it does is it allows infrastructure providers to construct new fiber facilities and roadways, apparently regardless of whether they're subject to moratoriums, using a a method that is called a slit trench, a micro trench. It's a very narrow trench, not very deep. And it's problematic for a number of reasons for local jurisdictions, not the least of which is that the bill actually allows the provider of the facilities to determine, I'm giving you a direct quote, the provider of the fiber facilities shall determine the method of installation of fiber. And from a protection of our right-of-way, our streets, it's very problematic. So I want to make you aware of this floating through the legislature. I think public works directors are becoming familiar with it, but it would be a problem for most jurisdictions to allow the installer of the facility to determine how it's installed. That gets into the traditional areas where we as the local government determine how our roadways are to be cut and patched and repaired, things like that. So I simply want to make the commission aware of that and keep you informed as that bill moves forward or hopefully dies in the legislature.
How
Thank
many,
you for
how many methods are possible?
Well, there are a lot of ways of doing it, and they're all dependent on what's there. As we were talking earlier, if a roadway's recently been repaved or resurfaced, there's sometimes when that repaving is done with a material that is used to protect it, and we get a warranty on that. And if it's cut, it basically voids the warranty.
Okay.
In some areas, this type of construction has been around for a very, very, very long time. And one of the concerns about it is because it's a very narrow slit trench, that over years, it either the top tends to wear out and you've got now kind of a crack in the roadway, or the whole facility floats upwards. So there are concerns about it. It's very different from the traditional method of cutting 12 to 18 inches wide, feathering the top, AC cap, all of that. And again, because it gives the installer of the facility out the jurisdiction the right to determine the construction method, I'm gonna go out on a real far limb here and suggest that probably cost will be the issue for them as opposed to for us, protection and maintenance of the right of way for the protection of the public. I'm just seeing that as kind of a potential problem.
Well, will they be responsible for repairs if things go sideways?
That's not in the bill. It would have to be addressed locally.
Okay.
Yep. Anyway, that's it. I'll provide you additional information
Jonathan?
as this works through.
Okay.
Jonathan, is there a specific reason this has come up now, this bill?
I actually believe that this is a national push. I've seen a similar bill in a different state. So, these things are coordinated nationally. Interestingly, this is not restricted to fiber for wireless, but it could also be taken advantage of by cable TV companies, telephone corporations in their telephone capacity, not wireless. Essentially anyone who has a right to go into the right of way. So pretty much all of the CPUC permittees or the telephone corporations that they recognize, as well as cable TV.
Jonathan, I'm assuming, but I'd rather have it stated, you will keep us abreast. And is there any action that is at this moment required of the city, or is it premature? Or
I've shared this with public works directors, not necessarily with not specifically with the public works director in Calabasas, but the information is up on their listserv and they're aware of it.
Michael Russo, I think it's best if this information gets to the appropriate party in the city, make sure that they're aware of its potential.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'll just add to that if I can. The City Council is expected to be considering taking a position on several items of housing legislation at their next meeting it would seem appropriate that this might be added to the mix for council to consider there. So staff can take it forward.
Okay.
If anyone's interested in the full text of it, I've put up the full text of it with a few side comments at wireless.blog.law, which is my blog site. You can see the full text there.
Hey, Jonathan, this is David. So they're allowed to pick the method of construction, are they? But they're not allowed to pick the path, correct?
We, under current law, maintain what's called time, place, and manner. Although this would certainly kill the manner portion of it, time and place. That said, there are some inherent, not restrictions, but some inherent considerations as to it. So no, it doesn't take away our authority to say where. However, functionally, because a provider needs to get their fiber to where they want to serve, all they have to do is to say, this is where we want to serve. So.
Correct. And micro trenching, was that 4 inches deep?
No, it's up to 4 inches wide and 12 to 26 inches, I believe. 12 to 26 inches in depth.
Okay. And they'll also have to go through permitting to make sure they're not in conflict with any other buried utilities, right? I mean,
Right, they would still have to go and get a go for permits. They'd have to have a dig alert certification. Those protections, at least in the current version of the bill, they exist. But this, like any other piece of legislation, as it moves from committee to committee and from the Senate later on to the Assembly, a lot of things happen at the last moment because the last minute's a good time to get stuff done that you don't want to have time to argue about.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Kramer?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Candice, there's one more attendee who would like to speak, Stephen Garcia. I'm gonna allow him to talk. He has 3 minutes.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Garcia, welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the commission. Stephen Garcia for Crown Castle. I just wanted to offer an opportunity of a different perspective slightly from what Mr. Kramer just explained to you about Senate Bill 338, I believe is the number. I wanted to let you know that we're working with various cities throughout California as well as the United States on this type of new technology, micro trenching. But as you already know, or you may know, there are other methods as well that exist. There's traditional trenching, which most of us are familiar with. Those are the foot wide by 2 to 3 feet deep for utilities such as fiber or other utilities in the public rights of way. And there's also boring. So typically, each of those methods is looked at by customers or excuse me, applicants like Crown Castle and trying to figure out the fastest path to deploy fiber. It's generally a combination of all the above, not just one or the other, unless there is aerial fiber available. So for example, if the city of Calabasas had a lot of wood poles with fiber and other telecom facilities on it, then that would be probably the easiest and fastest path. But in areas like yours and many others, most of the areas that we're looking at deploying new fiber can't be done aerially. So we look for these other options, including micro trench. But what we're finding in general practice is that micro trench, as good as it is, and it's typically faster and less costly, it's not always completely available to us the entire route. So the route would typically have to include boring, traditional trenching, and then micro trenching where we can accommodate that. And that has to do with a lot of the other issues that exist in each city, including yours, and that's substructure. So as you know, substructure is, we know it's there, we just don't always know where exactly it's at. But after you do your research, you kind of identify what's the best route, what's the best path, and what's the best method. So there's no, the Senate bill comes across as kind of strong-handed, but I would say the goal, I think, is legitimate. Maybe working with each city would kind of help make this more palatable to you. I'm sure we could and would like the opportunity to talk to you about the different methods so that you can adopt a microtrench solution that you think is fair. We did that with Long Beach. We did that with the city of LA. And so each city identifies its preferred method and type. So I would just say there's a lot of opportunities here. It doesn't have to be something that you need to be fearful of, but just something that you need to be aware of. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. That was very informative. Rachel, do we have any other hands?
That is all I have.
Okay, shall we move on to the public hearing? Everybody ready for that?
Mhm.
Okay. The public hearing is now open. This is a public hearing for consideration of the following matter. An ordinance to revise Calabasas Municipal Code Section 17.12.050, which is regarding antennas, personal wireless telecommunications facilities, and add a new chapter 17.31 to regulate wireless telecommunication facilities. Has the proof of posting and publication been filed for this public hearing?
And publication for this public hearing has been filed and no correspondence has been received.
Thank you. This public hearing is open. Are there any changes or additions to the staff report?
Good evening, Chair. No, there are no changes or additions to the staff report. I do have a PowerPoint presentation if you would like me to go through that, or when you're ready, I'll do that.
I think we should do it now. What do you guys think?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Whenever it's appropriate.
All right, I will go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint on the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I do want to make one point of clarification. The hearing notice that went out mentioned an amendment to section 17.12.050 and the addition of section 17.31, but the actual ordinance also includes a small amendment to 17.11.010 of the municipal code, which is the land use table, reflecting the overall changes that are also being proposed in section 17.31. I did bring this up with Matt, our city attorney, and he said that it did not require renoticing, but I just want to make sure that the record is clear. Of course, all of the relevant sections are outlined in the ordinance, the draft ordinance in front of the commission. I am joined tonight by Matt Summers, our assistant city attorney, as well as Jonathan Kramer, who spoke earlier, who is our wireless consultant, and Jacqueline Rackerby, our planning assistant or assistant planner, who has been assisting me through this process. So with that, I do want to jump into why the CTC is here tonight. Well, that's because under section 17.76 of the municipal code, the CTC acts as a planning commission for all matters related to wireless projects, including the reviewing body for considerations of amendments to section 17.12.050 of the municipal code. So what that means is that in this particular case, the CTC is responsible for reviewing the proposed amendments and then making a recommendation to the city council whether or not to approve those amendments or a different set of amendments. So again, this is a public hearing. This was noticed in the Acorn as well as the Enterprise, posted around the city, following normal procedures. There was no mailed notice because it's a citywide hearing, not specific to a particular parcel. And as Rachel had mentioned, we have not received correspondence regarding this public hearing item. We have received correspondence from the carriers regarding the initial outreach that we have done, but not specific to this public hearing item after we sent out the hearing notice. And of course, for anyone who's listening, there's still an opportunity to provide additional comments moving forward, because this will have to be scheduled for a public hearing with the City Council. So just to go through a background, back in June of 2019, between June and December of 2019, the city conducted a citywide survey. Through that survey, the city received over 1,000 responses. A handful of them were from residents outside the city or duplicates, so it was just a little bit under in terms of what was actually analyzed. The results of that survey concluded or demonstrated that there was a general dissatisfaction with the level of wireless service within and throughout the city. And also, equally as important, there was a general acceptance of the need to build new facilities within the city in order to improve wireless cell phone coverage. And that included the addition of new sites, new wireless facilities in and around residential areas. So I won't go through all of that because that is something that this body has looked at. You have seen that survey. So after that survey, the media department, or Michael Russo, our communications director, presented the results of that survey to the City Council in March of 2020. And the City Council had a discussion regarding the results of that survey. The City Council expressed a desire to look at the city's wireless ordinance and come up with solutions to basically develop or allow for a more reliable wireless service infrastructure. The result of that meeting was they requested that the CTC review the city's wireless ordinance and provide direction from there. So in April of 2020, this body reviewed the city's wireless ordinance and the results of that survey, and then directed Michael Russo to work with the planning staff as well as Jonathan Kramer and the city attorney, Matt Summers, to take a more in-depth review of the wireless ordinance, the current wireless ordinance, along with the wireless subcommittee from the CTC. We held several meetings with the subcommittee, discussed the components of the current wireless ordinance and the areas that staff and Jonathan and the city attorney believe should be addressed in order to make a better wireless ordinance, or one that would allow for more reasonable construction of new wireless facilities. After those meetings, staff returned to CTC in July of 2020 to provide the CTC with recommendations from those meetings from the subcommittee and staff. And at the July 2020 meeting, the CTC adopted a memo to send to City Council, and that memo identified what the constraints are with the city's current wireless ordinance, and then recommendations for ways to improve the wireless ordinance. On August 20th, or in August of 2020, the City Council then held another discussion considering the memo and the recommendations from CTC, and then formally directed staff to prepare a draft ordinance. And at that meeting, the City Council requested that staff also include, as part of an outreach effort, meetings with industry representatives as well as HOA members. And so staff has done that. We've held one Zoom meeting with industry representatives and another Zoom meeting with HOA members. Those meetings proved to be very helpful and very useful. From an industry standpoint, we were able to learn a little bit more about technological constraints in order to tweak our ordinance to make sure that if the goal of the ordinance is to allow for reasonable development, that it doesn't have too many constraints that prevent reasonable development. So through those meetings, we were able to get some valuable information, as well as the Zoom meeting and then follow-up correspondence that we've had with several of the carriers. And similarly with the HOAs, because as you'll see with the draft ordinance, HOAs, if adopted, would begin to act as a landlord potentially for future wireless facility installations. And so we wanted to make sure that the HOA members and presidents were aware of this ordinance and had an opportunity to ask questions of staff, and just know that this is something that they could take advantage of. I would say that there was a common question that came up at the HOA meeting was regarding health and safety of wireless facilities, which, as we have reiterated to this commission many times before, when it comes to the effects of radio frequency emission, that is under the purview of the FCC. It is not something that the city can regulate. We do require that a carrier, and this is something that we explained to the HOA members, that we require carriers to submit a letter certifying that their facilities meet FCC standards. But of course, we also let the HOA members know that as a landlord, if they choose to, they could request their own study from the carrier in a way that the city doesn't have the purview to do so. So that's just the background of how we got to where we are today. And of course, in between all of those meetings, staff has continued to meet with the wireless subcommittee, which is Commissioner Brockman and Commissioner Melcher, and that has also really helped us shape the ordinance, the draft ordinance that's provided to you guys today. So where are we at right now? Our current ordinance, which is located in section 17.12.050 of the municipal code, regulates all wireless facilities, including those within the public right-of-way. And again, I mentioned the public right-of-way because not all zoning codes regulate wireless facilities in the public right-of-way, because that's oftentimes handled strictly by the Public Works Department. And within section 17.12.050, we have 3 types of permits. There's a wireless telecommunication facility permit, which is a full discretionary permit, basically the same thing, requires the same type of findings as a conditional use permit, as well as findings from the carrier that the need for their facility is necessary to close a significant gap in their service coverage, and that it's the least intrusive means to close that gap. A wireless facility permit requires a public hearing with the Communications and Technology Commission, and also requires a mailed notice to all property owners within 1,500-foot radius of the proposed project of the project site. In addition to that, the hearing notice has to be sent out 30 days prior to the public hearing. And there are other requirements with regards to the wireless facility permit, such as facilities are not allowed within a residential zoning district, a school, or within 1,000 feet of a residential land use park or school, unless, again, that facility is necessary to close a significant gap in the carrier's coverage, and it's the least intrusive means to do so. We also have a minor modification permit, which was born out of 6409 of the 2012 Tax Act, and that requires the city to approve a minor modification that meets the FCC guidelines of a minor change to an existing wireless facility. That is not a discretionary permit, although we do have objective findings that a carrier has to demonstrate, such as that it meets the criteria for a minor modification under the FCC rules. And that is subject to a director's hearing. So that we do hold a public hearing for that. We send out a notice to all property owners within 300 feet and follow a standard 10-day hearing notice. And then there's a small wireless facility permit, which is the most recent permit that was implemented in 2019 in response to another FCC ruling. And that allows for certain wireless facilities under a certain size to be installed at a reduced fee. I say reduced fee because the fee that was set by the FCC is significantly less than what we would otherwise charge. And also under a constrained time period, as well as not being able to hold a discretionary review process. So those are the 3 types of permits that we currently have. And in addition to regulating wireless facilities, section 17.12 also regulates satellite dishes and radio antennas. So we have spoken about this before, but for the sake of clarity, the issues that were identified by the subcommittee and staff, and then also effectively adopted by the CTC in July, is that the current wireless ordinance results in relatively prohibitive requirements that have restricted the ability for carriers to install new facilities within the city of Calabasas, which the lack of being able to construct new facilities has ultimately resulted in subpar wireless service throughout the community. One of the first issues that we've discussed is process, and that's the fact that the wireless facility permit, which other than the small cell site, which went online in 2019, was the only way to build a new wireless facility. And it's a fairly restrictive process. And it doesn't matter whether a site is a well-designed site or a very ugly site or obtrusive site. It was a one-size-fits-all permitting process. Prohibited locations, again, within the wireless facility permit requirement, all new facilities are prohibited within residential and open space zoning districts. And more importantly, this includes gated streets within gated communities. So while there is an option for wireless carriers to use the public right-of-way and not have an issue with the zoning, because the public right-of-way is in the public right-of-way, gated communities, the streets and sidewalks in the gated community are actually privatized and are not technically a public right-of-way. So therefore, some of the very hard to reach areas of Calabasas, because there are many gated communities, are completely off limits for any new wireless facility. And then, as I had mentioned, the 1,000-foot setback from residential uses, schools and parks has also been a hurdle. I have a map that I'll show you guys later, but 90%, 95% of the city is within 1,000 feet of these type of uses. And then finally, just the overall organization of the ordinance. It's very long, and for it to be in just one section makes it rather difficult and cumbersome to utilize. So with all of that, and having taken in where our current ordinance is at, what the issues are, and then what the goals of the city council are, which they made very clear in August, which is to not necessarily completely rewrite the ordinance, but amend the ordinance so that it makes it more feasible and realistic for wireless carriers to be able to begin constructing new facilities within the city, reasonably designed self-facilities, and therefore encourage a better wireless infrastructure. So with all of that, we have been working with the subcommittee, and again, based on the feedback from the HOA meetings and the industry, we have developed a draft ordinance. And so these are the primary components of the draft ordinance. And of course, there are many tweaks within the ordinance that we had to make. Matt and I had to go through and make sure that that references were internally consistent, and make some adjustments to some of the standards, again, to make sure that they made sense for current technology and constructability of new sites. So one of the first components or major components of the draft ordinance is to remove the entire wireless section out and bring it to its own chapter within the municipal code. So chapter 17, we're proposing that it be chapter 17.31. This just makes it a lot easier to use the wireless ordinance and refer to it as its own chapter and use it within the municipal code rather than having it as a section. And we would maintain section 17.12.050, but it would stay as specifically for satellites and radio antennas. The primary focus of the draft ordinance is to develop a two-tiered permitting process for new wireless facilities. And so here, what we're proposing in this draft ordinance is to add a new tier 1 permit for stealth facilities. And this would allow facilities for a stealth facility within specific areas to be reviewed with a streamlined process and based on objective design standards, and would not require a public hearing. So, and I'll get into in a couple slides what are we talking about for stealth facilities. Next component is that as a stealth facility, allow tier 1 facilities within residential and open space zones that and this is also a key component, that those properties are already developed and under common ownership. So we're not talking about truly open space or vacant land. Really, the intent here is for HOAs to be able to utilize their existing developed common space to allow for wireless facilities within those properties. And that includes, like I had mentioned, streets and sidewalks, but also a lot of HOAs may have a park or tennis courts or a community rec room. This ordinance would allow a carrier to install their facility on those parcels as well. And of course, the HOA as the landlord gets to make the final choice and decision if they even want to entertain that. So it's not requiring an HOA to allow wireless facilities, but it's at least through our zoning ordinance allowing them to make that decision for themselves. Allow tier 1 facilities on arterial and collector roads, again, within the gated communities. And as I mentioned, that's important because there are a lot of streets within the city are behind gated communities and therefore are no longer considered a public right of way. And finally, allowing tier 1 cell facilities to be located within 1,000 feet of schools, parks, and residential land uses. So those are the main components of the draft ordinance. And I do just want to point out that when I mention residential on here, I am specifically referring to the residential single family and the RC, which is the rural community zoning districts. The draft ordinance still would not permit a wireless facility in a residential multifamily zone, a rural residential, or a hillside mountainous zone. We just felt that those areas were not as appropriate, but the RC and the RS zoning districts cover the bulk of the residential land area within the city. And also the ordinance, although it's in a new chapter, it does not fundamentally change the other existing permits. So what is currently a wireless facility permit and all the procedures that go along with a wireless facility permit, we would change the name to a tier 2 permit, but the actual procedures and requirements would remain the same. And same thing for a small wireless facility permit and a minor modification permit, those would also remain the same. So we had to make some tweaks, and we shuffled some language around to make sure that the ordinance made sense and was more user-friendly. But fundamentally, those three provisions, those three permits remain the same. The primary goal here was to create that new tier 1 permit process specifically for stealth facilities, and then allow that within the residential areas that are commonly owned under an HOA. And there was one last recommendation that did come out of the memo from the CTC to the City Council, and that was to implement a time limit on the ordinance to encourage the carriers to take advantage of the ordinance within a specific time period. After further consideration, staff and the CTC subcommittee agreed that it doesn't necessarily make sense to have a time limit on the ordinance. That then makes the ordinance feel almost punitive. If the carrier doesn't take advantage during that time period, then they're losing something. So rather than having a time limit, and by the way, the council can change any ordinance at any point in time that they want anyway. So nothing is set in stone forever, but the idea that an ordinance would just automatically expire after 12 to 18 months can be done, but it's not a common practice for this city. So our recommendation is to not have that, and so that's not in the draft ordinance. But as a way to encourage carriers to move forward with the project sooner rather than later, we recommend having a fee reduction for the first 12 to 18 months. And just as a number to throw out there, we anticipate that a wireless facility permit just for planning related fees would cost probably somewhere in the ballpark of $2,000. And if the council agreed with a fee reduction, then we would lower that to a much lower rate, probably closer to like what a small wireless facility permit is at. Other fees would still apply. We still have hard costs like having Kramer's office review a project and building permits, et cetera. Those are hard costs to the city because consultant reviews, but at least for planning staff, we could certainly look at, if the council agreed, doing a fee waiver for a certain period of time after the ordinance is in effect. So just to really quickly go over what's being proposed is the creation of this tier 1 permit. It would require a stealth design and no public hearing. Therefore, there would be no public notification radius, and the review authority would be staff. The tier 2 permit is the same thing as a wireless facility permit. So that includes the whole 9 yards, all of the conditional use permit findings, as well as least intrusive means and significant gap. It does require a public hearing, 30-day hearing notice with a 1,500-foot radius, and CTC is the review authority, which is appealable to City Council. And then again, we're going to maintain, the draft ordinance maintains the small wireless facility permit, minor modification permit. Both of those are also with the review authority at staff level, except that the minor modification permit actually has a public hearing with the community development director. Just from a timeline standpoint, I anticipate that if a carrier were to submit a tier 1 type of permit, so a self-facility that meets the criteria for a tier 1 permit, staff could probably process that in about 1 to 2 months. It's really the whole public hearing notification aspect that tends to delay the timeline of being able to process an application. So a tier 2, I estimate, would take anywhere from 4 to 6 months, whereas a small wireless facility permit and a minor modification permit typically take about 2 to 3 months. Again, there's always variables, primarily with regards to responsiveness from the applicant, but that's a general estimate of how long we estimate that it would take to process each of these permits. So you could see that the goal here is to encourage a stealth facility and therefore encourage carriers to move forward with a tier 1 type of permit because it would be less costly and take much less time to process. And also a tier 1 permit, a small wireless facility permit, and a minor modification permit, they are all decisions made by staff, which means that they are appealable. So any decision made at the staff level is appealable, and that appeal would go to the CTC. And from there, if that decision is appealed, then that would go to City Council. So this is our infamous black dog map, which although Jonathan and I disagree on where the head and where the tail is located, but I think we both agree that it looks like a dog in some fashion. But this map represents what effectively in the blacked out areas, those areas are currently prohibited under our current wireless ordinance. So with the exception of some areas where there's still where the streets are in the public right of way, a carrier could install like a small wireless facility in a public right of way. But in terms of any facility in a gated community or on private property, the only zones that a carrier or that a wireless facility is currently allowed are on these in the commercial and the recreation zones. And that's over here on Calabasas Road, over here on Agora and Las Virgenes Road. Everywhere else is off limits within the city of Calabasas. So it's fairly clear from this map that the current ordinance is very prohibitive in terms of where a wireless facility is allowed to be located. Under the proposed draft ordinance, I've removed the black color from the areas that are off limits. And so now you can see how a significant portion of the city effectively is opened up. Doesn't mean that every possible location could be built on, but these are the areas that from a zoning standpoint, a tier 1 facility would now be allowed. And again, if that tier 1 facility is being proposed in a residential area or on a residential zone lot or in an open space lot, that lot has to, number 1, be developed, i.e. with a street or a park or a pool, and it has to be under common ownership. So a private homeowner would not be able to have a wireless facility built on their property. And then finally, this is a map from our general plan, and I had mentioned that the tier 1 facility would be permitted within arterial and collector roads. And so the purple lines through this map represent arterial roads. So those are really like the main veins through the city: Mulholland Highway, Old Topanga, Las Virgenes Road, Calabasas Road, Lost Hills Road. And then the green lines represent the collector streets. So from the standpoint of a wireless facility that is being requested to be installed within a sidewalk or a street, this is the area that tier 1 facilities would be limited to. Now, a carrier could still pursue in the public right of way a small wireless facility permit or a wireless facility permit that's not on these. But from a tier 1 stealth facility or a tier 1 standpoint, which provides that streamlined process, they would have to make sure that a tier 1 facility is located within these green or purple streets. And of course, a lot of these streets do open up some of the gated communities that are hard to reach. So moving on, what's a stealth facility? Because that's the primary function of a tier 1, is that it has to be stealth. Well, a stealth facility is one that is either completely hidden or really camouflaged to the point where it's very well done and nicely screened. So here are 3 examples of tier 1, or what would qualify as a tier 1 facility, that are stealth designs and are either fully camouflaged or properly camouflaged. At the Summit Shopping Center, you have in one of their commercial buildings, they have a parapet roof system. And so part of their roof has been completely replaced with a RF friendly material. And so they have antennas mounted here, and all of their equipment is located on the roof. This site is 100% not visible to anyone. Same thing on Calabasas Road. This is one of the office buildings, I believe 23945 Calabasas Road. And they also have a mansard roof. So you could stand on the top of this roof. There's about a 5-foot height difference between the pitch right here and then the roof deck. And so here they've removed a portion of the tile roof, replaced it with a RF friendly tile material, which blends in very nicely with the rest of the roof. And the antennas are located behind it. They actually have multiple sectors. This is just one of the sectors. And then all of the equipment is located actually within an equipment room that is also pretty well screened or blended in with the architecture of the building. And then finally, here's a facility that's on Parkway Calabasas. It's in the public right of way, and there's a light standard with antennas inside of a ray dome at the top of the light standard. I noticed that facility, and I'm sure as a commission that has reviewed these, you guys would pick that out. But most people drive by a site like this and don't even notice that there are wireless antennas within that light standard. And then here's an example actually of a facility within the city of Calabasas that at one point in time when it was first built would not qualify as a tier 1. So I identified this as a tier 2. This is on Calabasas Road in Old Town. And at one point in time, they had antennas just mounted to the outside of the building, actually in multiple sectors. And down the road, when they came in and obtained a wireless facility permit, that I believe this body actually reviewed, the proposal included replacing the antennas and putting them actually inside of a stucco enclosure, one that is also RF friendly. But so now what's out there is the building as you see it today, and those antennas are fully screened behind effectively an architectural feature that matches the design of the rest of the building. So again, if they were to propose a project like that today, it would go through a tier 1 process rather than a wireless facility permit, which is what they went through several years ago. Another key component to the draft ordinance is reference to design guidelines. And so staff worked with, really, we worked with the carriers to get their feedback, as well as the subcommittee to develop design guidelines that would act as a supplemental document to the ordinance and provide direction both to staff and to the public and to the applicants as what would be considered a stealth facility. It's not specific standards because architecture is very subjective. So the intent here is really to provide criteria and visual aids to assist everyone in identifying what would be considered a stealth facility. So this is a supplemental document. The document includes pictures like I've shown here of examples of what would be considered a stealth facility and what would not be considered a stealth facility. And that includes pictures and examples for both right-of-way and non-right-of-way facilities. So in this particular example that I took out of the design guidelines, this is referencing how one way that you can provide or build a stealth wireless facility is to provide an architectural feature that's integrated into the building. And so the image that's on the right, the wireless antennas are all located within this clock tower. And the clock tower, for the most part, it is designed to complement and look appropriate with the building. And in my opinion, and the subcommittee's opinion, this would be a stealth facility and therefore subject to a tier 1 permit process under the draft ordinance. On the other hand, the one that's on the image that's on the left has a handful of problems. Not only is that architectural element pretty out of place and not in keeping with the character of the rest of the building, but antennas are also mounted on the outside of it. So this is how in the design guidelines, we're pointing out that that is a poor example of using architectural features, and therefore that would not qualify as a stealth facility and would not be eligible to be processed as a tier 1 permit. So finally, with all of that, staff concludes that the proposed draft ordinance meets the required findings for found in section 17.76.050 of the municipal code. And those are the findings that are required to approve amendments to the development code. Staff recommends a fee reduction for 18 months after the ordinance goes into effect rather than an expiration of the ordinance. And again, that's built into the draft ordinance that is in front of the commission today. And that the design guidelines that we have also provided to the commission would supplement the ordinance and should be adopted by city council resolution. And finally, I have to mention that it's our opinion that the proposed amendments to the municipal code are exempt from further environmental review under CEQA per section 15061B3, primarily because number one, what we're talking about here is really adding the ability to build stealth facilities within the community, and therefore they should have no visual impact to the city. And really this is an ordinance, so ultimately any project that gets reviewed by staff down the road in the future would be subject to its own secret review component. So again, staff's recommendation is that this project or the proposed amendments are exempt from further secret review. And so finally with that, staff recommends that the CTC adopt resolution 2021-044, recommending to the city council approval of ordinance 2021-391. And I am available for further questions.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just want to let you know I keep getting kicked off of this. So if it does, Michael Brockman, you'll have to take over if I disappear again. But are there any commissioner questions regarding the staff report?
I have one, please.
Okay.
First of all, I think the subcommittee and the staff and Jonathan did an amazing job in putting this all together. I know from a distance, they spent a lot of time on this. My only question, and I know it's probably minor, is regarding this fee reduction. I would think that, are we talking about like Verizon and AT&T, T-Mobile? I mean, are we talking about these multi-zillion-dollar companies? Are we talking about some mom and pop operation?
Well, the fee reduction would be just for the obtaining a planning permit, and it's not biased towards who's applying for it.
But I guess my question is, do we really think, I mean, I think that the carriers want to be in here, and saving them $500 seems to be, I think the city could use the money more than the carriers because of COVID and less taxes collected. So I think, in theory, maybe it sounds good, but in practice, I don't see why there has to be any fee reduction for the first 18 months. That's just my opinion.
I have a couple of questions too. Are there any other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, I have some.
Okay, I'll go ahead and ask mine real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
I had two questions. If there's not going to be 1,000-foot setback, how close can they be? How close can they put a facility to a home, for example?
We still have general standards, so we haven't removed our normal setback requirements, number one. So the standard setback for a zone would still apply. And we also have a specific standard or a specific setback for a freestanding wireless facility from a residentially zoned lot. And so those have not been removed from the ordinance, and they would still apply. So if a carrier proposed to put up a flagpole, for example, they would have to demonstrate that they're meeting that. And the requirement is that the facility or the flagpole, for example, would have to be 150% of the height of that flagpole from any residentially zoned property. So if it was a 25-foot tall flagpole, why'd I choose 25 feet? It would have to be somewhere around like 42 feet from the nearest residentially zoned property line. Now, if there was an existing, let's say, existing clubhouse, and a carrier proposed to, like what I showed in one of those images, construct a architectural feature on that clubhouse, like a chimney, then it would just sort of be limited to whatever that existing footprint of that building is. How far, I don't know how, I mean, there may be clubhouses that are less than 30 feet from a residential property, but if it's freestanding, it would have to meet that setback.
Okay, and my second question, thank you, Michael. And by the way, I too agree with Richard. You guys did an amazing job, and that was a really outstanding presentation.
Thank you.
The other question I have is, how many of these can be allowed on one property? Like, could I end up with my house ringed with cell sites on the public right-of-way?
So, well, number one, our ordinance does encourage co-location. So in theory, a properly designed wireless facility on, let's say, HOA-owned property could house multiple wireless carriers. If, again, properly designed co-located facility is what we do encourage. We don't have a limit on the number of facilities within a parcel. Something that we could certainly look into, but then when you start to run into, I guess, at what, do you allow only one on a parcel less than a certain size? And then maybe if it's over, let's say 30,000 square feet, you allow additional site, more sites. I don't know. I don't have that answer. So no, to answer your question, we have not limited that.
Michael, I'm not so much worried about the amount of carriers, but what about the wattage output and the EME restrictions and things like that? How are you going to regulate that?
I'm going to jump in here if you don't mind.
Yep.
The answer is that because the FCC sets the national standards, we are allowed to determine whether a wireless facility of any type complies with the national standards. And if it does, It's one of the things, in fact, we do when we review projects. If it does, then it's not subject to any additional conditioning by us. That's the state of the federal law. So we determine compliance, but we don't make value judgments about the output wattage itself.
Okay, so I was knocked off again, but I'm back. So did we conclude with my last question about how many on one property? I think you said there's no limit.
Correct, yeah. Under the draft ordinance, there is no limit.
And if I could add one more point there to Commissioner Weber to answer on the other question about setbacks. The other thing to bear in mind is that for existing utility infrastructure, that is existing streetlights in particular, that would be the carriers in the right places could add wireless facilities on top of the existing light poles. But so the distance there would be the same distance as that light pole is already from nearby homes, provided, of course, that it was either a publicly owned street or the HOA had consented if it's a privately owned street.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Michael Brockman, did you have some questions?
Yeah, I do, and they are pretty much constrained to Exhibit B. There is a clause on page, well, first of all, I recommend to you, when you're going to the council with this, that you number these pages.
Yeah. Good idea, Mike.
Is trying to figure out exactly where you are and verbalize where you are. It gets a bit cumbersome. To begin with, I would start on page 16 of the, because I numbered them all, there's 50 pages. Let me just go to what I called my page 16, and then I'll tell you what it says at the top. It's, boy. It's under conditions of approval for all new or modified wireless. Let me get this clip off.
This is going to take us a long time to find this.
Yeah, and that's why they say they need to be numbered.
Michael, do you have a section number?
Let me just tell you.
Section numbered, yeah.
Yeah, I was
That's what
gonna
I'm
say
trying to
section
get
number.
to right now. It is draft ordinance Exhibit B, and it is under, it says B, permit requirements. I think this is the one. Yes, it's got a subheading here of permit requirements near the top. It's like the third paragraph at the top of the page. And it says permit requirements, no wireless telecommunication facility shall be installed, modified until the applicant or operator has obtained, and then it goes through listing things, and then you go down further. Oh no, I'm too far back. I'm too far back. All right, it's number 2. Standards for wireless telecommunication facilities not located within the public right of way. And it is under 2.
It's not under permit requirements, as you said.
Well, boy, I tell you.
Michael, keep reading.
Oh, let me tell you. Let me tell you what the issue is.
Find it.
Let me tell you the issue, and then you can probably find it. It has to do with the paragraph that says a wireless telecommunication facility approved by a Tier 2 wireless facility permit may operate only until the 10th anniversary of the date it is first placed into service. Now, that specific language runs afoul of some problem we had a few years ago. Because as I read this, you're saying that they get a permit, but it doesn't start to kick in until they start to install, or until they install or make the facility active. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The current.
So that in effect, they get a permit, they could sit for 5 or 6 years and do nothing, and then the clock starts ticking.
Not entirely.
Okay.
If they get a permit, and so again, for Well, number one, that's one of our existing conditions in our current ordinance. We didn't change that requirement. So for a wireless telecommunication facility permit, that's a standard condition. Under the municipal code, a carrier has 1 year to act on their permit. They could request a one-time extension. So in theory, once a permit has been issued by the planning department, in this case via the CTC, they would have 2 years to begin construction.
So that well, you say begin, but this says it starts when they put it into service.
There's two different clocks. There's the clock that they have from the date it is approved. They have 1 year and then a possible 1 year extension by the director to exercise the permit, meaning to begin construction. And then they have, under the building code, if it requires construction, they have to diligently pursue and complete construction with no gap longer than 180 days from when they begin construction. Most wireless permits don't take that long to actually construct. So they generally have 1 year to get it online. Could be extended another year, so 2 years max. Then once it's online, then this second clock starts, and that's a 10-year clock for the permit to be used to expire unless, of course, extended.
Yeah, we had a situation a few years ago, I don't know if you guys remember it, where someone had a permit and had been sitting on it for at least 2 or 3 years, and then wanted to start to install it, and the clock was going to start to tick at that point. And what we ended up with is an agreement whereby they got an 8-year extension for the 2 years that they didn't use was applicable, so that they had an 8-year remaining term. I'm just trying to incentivize them to take action, not just to get a permit, and to put some pressure on them. Now, if you think that the constraints that you just identified will be sufficient, I will abide by your judgment. But this
Michael.
language doesn't say any of that. Yeah.
Michael, let me offer some thoughts here.
Yeah.
The reason that we have the 1 year plus 1 year is because the wireless carriers, let me look at you this way. The wireless carriers build based on capital budgets.
Yep.
And they, depending on how long it takes or where they're in the cycle, they may not have the capital budget to build an appropriate site for the approved site. So that's why we have the 1+1. As for the 10-year permit issue, generally that is constrained by state law. That's the minimum term. In the case that you brought up, my recollection is that it was either go back for an entirely new permit and start the process completely over, or accept the city's offer to essentially revive a permit and have it expire when it would have otherwise. So
yeah, I think actually, if I can jump in, I believe what happened in that case was there was a facility that was constructed, let's say in 2002, should have expired in 2010 by, whatever reason, it stayed in operation. And then when they came forward to renew that permit for another 10 years, it was already, let's say 2014. And so they were granted 8 years instead of 10 years because they were 2 years behind when it already would have expired.
Mm-hmm. All right, look, I don't want to overdo this. The issue for me was, and you may have answered it because of your saying that they basically have a 2-year window, although divided into 2 segments, before they have to start to take action on an approval. And if that's the case, fine, okay? Because that that's not in here, so I didn't know about these other constraints.
Yeah, to answer your question directly, Commissioner Brockman, I think we have existing protection, and the citation is chapter 1764, in particular, section 1764-050, and we'll get a copy of the commissioners, of the rest of the zoning code has those 1 year plus 1 year limits. And
Okay.
I think that provides enough of a basis to
I
force
know,
carriers to get it going.
Matt, I'm
So,
fine. If you say
yeah.
it's there, it's there. I don't want to make unnecessary work. I accept
Okay.
it, and we're fine.
But a great point to raise for the commission and public to consider. Thank you.
Okay. The same thing, by the way, that same paragraph is also on page 30 of mine, a little further down when you're writing it again. But at this point, it's fine. The other one is next one is a very minor one on page, well, now I gotta find it. It's nearby. It is on a paragraph. Let me see if I can get the closest handle for you.
Well, we definitely can see that not having numbered pages is a big issue.
That's why I'm saying.
Apologies on that one. Too many versions of the same document.
Yeah, because it makes our work hard to accomplish in a timely manner.
Yeah.
No, understood, of course. Michael, we were all on the one page you were on, so if you want to count the number of pages forward, that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Okay, from the point we were on, which was my page 16, 6 pages forward.
6 forward, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Matt. That's a good idea. It's a very minor one, very minor. It is on paragraph 7, number 7. It says site survey.
Yeah.
And the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line down, this previous sentence says the survey shall identify and depict all existing boundaries, encroachments, and other structures with 200 feet. Is it with or within?
Within.
Within.
Thank you.
Okay. And then the same thing occurs 6 pages forward. Same applicable line. 28.
I found it, paragraph 6.
Yeah. I mean, that's not the kind of thing that spell check would pick up. There is a question that I have. It is from that page, the first time it occurs, it's 14 pages forward. There's a word used I'd never heard before, but it may be legit. It is on the bottom paragraph of the page, number 4, indemnification. And it uses the words as a consequence of arising out of or in any way attributable to actually, allegedly, or impliedly. I never heard the word impliedly before.
Yeah, it's real.
Okay, next. From that point, 8 pages forward. And the top of that page starts up with small letter B, the proposed collocation or deployment is at the top of that particular page. And the issue I raise is under number 3 in the middle of that page, where you have sub-listings of A, B, and C. Submit a new small wireless facility permit application. A and B seem to me to be identical, so I don't understand what the distinction is between the two. Is something missing, or am I misreading it?
It's identical.
I'm just worried that there was something else that was supposed to have been there to distinguish the two.
Yes, I'm not finding what page you're on though.
All right.
I think what it would be, and sorry, I did find it. Michael, it's Mr. Michael Klein. It's section 1731.080 subsection I, 3, small wireless facility permit denial without prejudice. I think the answer is A and B are the same, and they shouldn't be the same. The trick is to delete the word small in the second iteration of it, so that subsection 3B would read, submit a new wireless facility permit application for the same, potentially the same proposed
Well,
co-location
that's the distinction.
deployment. That's the distinction that we need to have. In other words, if someone's permit is denied without prejudice, then they have 3 options. Try again with the same permit, try again with a full-scale new wireless facility permit, or appeal.
So what are you saying to eliminate?
So in the second iteration of it, in subsection B,
Yeah,
delete small as the fourth
Okay.
word.
got it.
And I think that'll take care of that one.
And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Good catches.
Well,
Are there any other questions? Any other commissioners? No other questions from commissioners? Okay, let's move on. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak on this item?
I do have, oh, there, oh yes, Stephen Garcia has raised his hand to speak on the item. So I'm going to allow him to talk and then we can have the timer come up for his 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Garcia.
Good evening again, Stephen Garcia. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the commission, Jonathan Kramer. Just a question I have. I'm trying to understand the difference between a tier 1 permit is that versus a small wireless facility? Are we talking about macros versus small cells, or is there not a distinction between tier 1 permits versus small wireless facilities? Oops.
Right, so there is a distinction, and the key distinction is where they're allowed.
Okay.
Small wireless facility permits are not allowed in residential areas. Only tier 1 facilities are allowed in residential areas. And that's probably the most critical distinction, noting that residential areas means not parcels with the house. It means areas that are zoned residential that are themselves streets or HOA-owned streets or common area or non-open space, non-development restricted open space and recreational parcels on the map that Mr. Klein had out earlier.
Okay.
Also, I would add, in theory, a macro cell site like the rooftop facilities that I showed, if it's a self-design, that would also qualify as a tier 1 permit. So it's not, tier 1 is not limited to just a small site. It's limited by the design of the site.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question I have would be, in the HOAs, the gated communities, all these options are available to a carrier or applicant to apply for and design their networks using these various solutions, rooftops, streetlight poles, small wireless facilities. Would that be true?
Yes, all of course with consent of the property owner of the HOA.
Yes. Next question, or last question, I know I'm limited on time here. What's the city's position or reaction to decommissioning of streetlights in favor of a new streetlight pole that could be owned by the city but operated by Crown Castle or an applicant such as Crown Castle? Is there any reason why that isn't allowed or is allowed?
You mean instead of Southern California Edison?
Yes, that's correct.
We haven't really reviewed that at this point or created a recommendation of the council. It'd be ultimately up to the city council. So Stephen, that's helpful information for us to take forward to the council. May I recommend that you put that as a written question so that we can include it in the record
Sure.
later on?
Yeah, I'll be sure to provide comments. What's my time limit on my opportunity to submit comments to you for council consideration or your next staff package?
Let's see, it's 6:20 right now.
Yeah.
You have until 6:25. No, we're targeting March 24th as the city council meeting.
Okay.
When would he have to get his comments into you, Michael?
Go ahead.
Yeah, the packets go out the week before. So 1 week before March 24th, if I have them in my hand, I'll include them in the packet.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just have questions centered around use of streetlight poles or streetlight replacements, co-location on streetlight poles. There's just a lot of things that could be or are important to small cell deployments as opposed to macros or typical or traditional towers that I'd like to just kind of emphasize.
Yeah, I concur completely with Dr. Kramer's statement. Those would be great to have in writing. The other voices to be aware of the need to be in that conversation, of course, the city council.
Yep.
Also, the public works department would need to take a look at whether if the council so directs, what it would look like to take that on. But I think it's certainly something that the city is open to considering, subject to further evaluation. So yeah, we would welcome a written proposal thereon.
And Stephen, I would encourage you to not wait until near Okay, that way we have time internally to socialize this with other people who may want to have input into it. So thanks.
Yeah,
Steve.
thank you.
No, and sorry, just so that we're all clear though, I mean, from a ordinance standpoint, I don't see that as something that we would necessarily amend or change in the draft ordinance, right? Matt, Jonathan, this would be more of a policy discussion with Public Works and City Council.
It is, I think that's right, Michael, that it is a policy decision, but it's something that I suspect council will have some interest in having some discussion at least. But as Steven Garcia and I both know, a lot of these come down to location. And there's some tangential issues that get involved, like power meters versus not having a power meter. So it's an important discussion, and it's timely to do it as part of this process.
And I would just add, agreed, and I would just add that the existing tier 1 facility options in the draft ordinance would allow for streetlights to, if stealth, of course, if hidden, to be used for wireless facilities. So that would allow, I think the ordinance we're proposing would allow this approach to have Crown Castle or city on poles, provided the other pieces to be worked out.
Great, thank you.
Is Castle a 24-hour operation?
Yeah, Crown Castle maintains a network operations center to track alarms on our fiber networks as well as our small cells and towers. So we have a nationwide network, and that's monitored 24/7.
So, so that consumers could contact you if you were the owner of our streetlights to tell you that streetlights are out?
That's correct. So we have a 24-hour operation, and there's a phone number that's usually associated with the site, at the site, or on a meter, or on the pole itself, and that number can be called anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other speakers, Rachel?
That was all.
Okay.
Candace, just because Steven Garcia is here as the industry rep, I'd suggest that we simply ask him if he has any other topics he'd like to bring up. You've been very courteous in terms of letting him go beyond the clock, but I want to make sure before we let him go that he has said all the things that he'd like to at this level of the conversation.
Is that okay with the rest of the commission?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Garcia, are you still here?
Yeah, I sure am. Thank you.
Is there anything else you wanted to say?
I would just say that, you know, and to encourage or incentivize carriers or companies like Crown Castle, which are a shared infrastructure company, I think opening up the opportunities and expanding those opportunities for small cells in the public rights of way is great. Hopefully the HOAs that were kind of insisting on better coverage in their gated communities will feel the same. It seemed like it, based on your survey, that they want better service. But I think what you're going to see is that we're going to need a combination of those traditional rooftop stealth facilities, bell towers, clock towers that may exist on their properties as a community center. But you're also going to need streetlights and fiber in those communities as well. So there's no one size fits all for any part of the community. It's going to be a combination of fiber-based connectivity to small cells, such as streetlight replacements, and then where possible, you know, a macro facility built into a tower or rooftop. So it's going to take a collaboration of those different elements and features in a network. But there's always going to be underground fiber construction, power construction needed to build up the backbone of any network, including what we may propose in Calabasas. So that was just something to be aware of. There are many moving parts. And so that's why when I mentioned fiber, it's an important part and always a part of each small cell deployment, tier 1, tier 2, or any other category you have here on your slide deck and in your ordinance. So I just want you to be aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Okay, we appreciate your input this evening.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, and the conversation was great. Thank you. I've made many notes, and I'll be sure to get you comments next week.
Okay. If there are no other speakers, the public hearing is closed. And now it says, is there a motion? Are we gonna create a motion to approve this draft?
I will make a motion, Candace.
I would second.
Oh, what? I haven't even made a motion yet. You don't know what I was gonna say.
Sorry, Dan.
Staff recommends, the CTC recommends that you adopt CTC resolution number 2021-044, recommending to the city council approval of draft ordinance 2021-391.
But what about with the changes that were discussed?
With the thank you, Candace, inclusive of the amended changes made tonight.
Madam Chair, may I just ask Jonathan about the incentive again? Because no one, when I raised the question, no one answered. Does he feel that incentive is very important, that it should be there?
Yeah, the incentive is important because frankly, the industry told us it was important. And the way it's been structured here is to give the industry an opportunity to effectively put their cell sites where they're, that was a bad turn of the phrase. But the bottom line, Richard, is that they have said that our prior process was disincentivizing them. We have the community input through the survey. The council wants to look and give the industry an opportunity to demonstrate that if they have a more straightforward process, that they will actually use it. So that's why there's an incentive system.
And you feel the financial incentive is symbolically important?
Well, more than symbolic, it's actually.
Well, but we're not talking for a giant provider that $500 an app, it's going to be huge to them, I would think.
I would tell you that because they are dealing with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of sites that are going in right now, it actually, $500 actually does make a difference. The balance here is if they actually step up and perform, the benefit that is achieved for the community of having much better wireless coverage, that's the balance point. If they don't step up, if they don't demonstrate that, in fact, after we heard them and took these steps, then adjustments can be made to realign the process. But I think this is the right thing to do at the right time for the limited time that we're talking about.
Okay, I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Okay.
Follow up on that? Real quick. In fact, Dr. Kramer, it's probably to you. So if a lot of the larger carriers probably have their budgets projected out for 2 years plus, do you think that 18 months is enough of a window to allow them to take advantage of it?
Yeah, because it's to come in and get the permits. It's not to commence construction. It's the permit period. Then they have the 1 year to construct and a second year if approved by the directors. So yes, it is adequate.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
1 second.
Let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Michael Brockman?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone. This was an amazing scope of work. I'm so proud of everyone. It's really, really amazing. So
It was, and I would also just like to reiterate that it was a very big team effort between the communications department, the subcommittee, and Jonathan and Matt. So thank you very much.
Michael, I just want to say that it was a terrific example of collaborative work. But
yeah,
let's give a acknowledgement to Michael and to Jacqueline because they did the hard work, you know. This was no easy task. So great job, guys, really, very good.
I'd like also to remember the fact that we had significant and important input from the community the HOAs and the industry. So it was well beyond just internal to the city.
Look what we can do when we work together instead of against each other. It's so amazing. Human beings are so amazing.
Well, we got one big hurdle to go. Actually,
Okay.
two.
Okay. So thank you all. And shall we go on to our monthly reports? Rachel, the cable complaints review.
Madam Chair, before you do, is this a logical time to excuse me, or would you like me to be available for anything else going forward on this hearing tonight?
I should ask the commission. Does anyone?
I think Jonathan and the staff have done their job for the night.
Yeah.
And the same question as to me, per prior council
Yes.
direction, we
You
attend.
too, Matt. I should have
No
included
issues.
you in that. Thank you. You did a great job.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you all. And
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Good
Good
luck.
night.
Okay, we're back together. Here we are. Rachel, do you want to go ahead and do the cable complaints review?
The city has not received any new complaints since our last meeting.
Thank you. And the cable reports, we have them in the packet, right?
There was no cable reports provided and no cable representative is present at the meeting.
The cupboard is bare, huh?
Yes, it's pretty normal these days, but
Yes. Okay, let's move on to subcommittee reports. The wireless subcommittee. Well,
We said it all.
Been there, done that.
yeah,
Right.
I think that was the bulk of it. How about the video services subcommittee? Anything?
No, I don't think so, Richard. I don't believe we had anything.
No, maybe at some point, not tonight, we can elaborate again the scope of that subcommittee, maybe for a future item.
Yeah,
How about the programming subcommittee? I don't think we have anything, do we, Richard?
No, that will work on maybe before the next meeting.
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
The broadband subcommittee. Anything?
Nothing unless David has anything.
Okay,
No,
you mean, okay, got it. Okay, let's move on to the director's report.
In keeping with the recent theme, I'll be brief. You do see the smartphone app usage report in your packet, as well as the report on Granicus and YouTube usage by the public. Keeping in mind that, besides the television channel, most people are watching, most people are getting video content from our other social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor, Instagram, and those are doing quite well. In terms of any kind of upcoming events, I mean, really the only thing we have coming up very soon would be daylight saving time starting on March 14th. So that's really about it.
I like, Michael, I like the stuff you're putting out on Nextdoor very much.
Oh, good. Thank
You and your department.
Good team.
Yeah. Okay. Arvind, you want to do the staff update on the CTV programming report?
Yes, please, I do. Thank you, Chair Weber and Commissioners. Good evening. I'd like to quickly go over our production for January and February of 2021. We have our usual school board meetings happening second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. We did a variety of CTV PSAs regarding safety for COVID-19, social distancing and masking up. I can't believe we still have to do that, but there's people that we find that don't abide by those rules, and it's a better thing for the safety of everyone if they do.
The
So
PSAs were great. I love the PSAs.
good. Yes, short and to the point, and that's what we're aiming for.
And really dynamic, you know.
Thank you. Thank you. We did a series about the vaccine that was very helpful and informative. Doctors and pharmacists around Calabasas. So those are all out and running right now. Some of our production, we work with the library to update their February information, Black History Month and their new books. And again, we're there just yesterday to make some new ones for March, Women History Month, and also new books and information that they have going. Again, I want to thank the Calabasas Pharmacy, the Courtyard Pharmacy, and our own resident, Dr. Todd McGregor, who volunteered his time. He's a ER doctor who works at various hospitals, and he worked with us to make a little infomercial about vaccines and the pros and what effects you might have. So thanks to all of them, and we'll probably revisit them again in another couple of weeks with new information. So we look forward to that. Some events in addition to that is photos of the Carl Gibbs Environmental Award winner. We recorded and archived the Brown Act ethics training for commissioners and council members. The Mayor's Youth Council is a monthly thing that we record and archive for the city clerk and the mayor as well. Some upcoming information, we will make some updates about city facility updates, continue the Zoom council and commission meetings and department meetings. We record and archive all those, all the virtual city events, Calabasas Library, as I mentioned. Upcoming this morning, we went over to De Anza Park for a Love Rocks pop-up garden that's happening at De Anza Park. So look for that show next week. Also, we're in touch with the school district to create some information about, what's happening with LVUSD and what grades are opening. So these are questions we'd like to get answered, and we'll be disseminating that information next week, I'm sure. And again, all the city facilities, tennis swim center, library, senior center, community center, whatever info we get, we are available to send that out. And lastly, a list of 10 meetings for February that I have here that are live or recorded, and they replay and archived all over the website and social media. And all this and more is on cityofcalabasas.com. So take a look. Thank you so much.
Candace, may I just?
Yes.
I just went, Arvin, I also, I saw the short discussion led by Brenda Johnson from the Calabasas Pharmacy, and I thought that was really well done. How you produced, how you guys and the team produced it, and her content, I thought was very current and valuable. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Arvin. Great report. You guys are just such busy bees. I'm really amazed what you put out. Okay, future agenda items. We have a presentation on 5G, which we've carried forward. I'm not sure when we want that. Anybody, did we talk about when we wanted to get that by, or is it just out there?
I think it's just out there.
Okay.
I think maybe Michael Russo, maybe if you have a chat with Jonathan as to when it might be appropriate to follow up on that idea.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Jonathan would be the one leading that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And Candace, my future agenda item, which maybe you guys are working on anyway, and I know it's very difficult, but to try to organize, maybe if not, maybe not till the fall, but to communicate about a student member.
Yeah. Good idea.
I think that's important, that we shouldn't drop that entirely.
Oh, I agree too.
I'll make a note. We did put a notice out that went out, I believe last month. We've only received one application back. So Michael, Mari, city clerk, we're in discussion about if we were going to bring one forward to you all or wait and try to get a couple more.
And I reached out to that particular person. I emailed that person, gosh, almost a week ago, and still have not received any kind of response.
Oh, that's not good.
No.
So to answer Rachel's question, yes, we probably ought to wait and get a couple more.
Okay, good. Anybody else want to put anything on future agenda items? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the Communications and Technology Commission will adjourn to their next regular meeting on March 16th, 2021 at 5 p.m. Thank you all for attending. We love having you and we love serving you. Thank you very much and good night.